folks, I hope you're doing well. Thanks for tuning in to my latest video all about my manga Future Saviors. And this one is all about Saki, the outsider. So for those of you who usually tune in for my retro gaming, pixel art, Amiga, whatever kind of stuff, don't immediately tune out. There may be something tangentially in here that you may find slightly interesting about perhaps why I'm putting out less of those kinds of videos at the moment, shall we say. So I want to talk about my character, Saki Endo. So this is Saki Endo. For those of you who have read part 1 of Future Saviors, you will have met her already. Oh, gone fishing because I had a training day today and this was pinned to my chair most of the day. Anyway, so yeah, I've wanted for the longest time to create a story about a young woman who is a bit of an outsider kind of thing. It's something I've been working on for at least 17 years or more. If you haven't watched a video about what came first, Saki or the story of Future Saviors, I'd recommend that you go and watch that because that may fill in some of the gaps that you may find from just watching this video. But yeah, one of Saki's defining attributes is the fact that she is an outsider. Now this video has taken me an inordinate amount of attempts to record because I've been interrupted by emergency broadcasts because unfortunately we do have a typhoon that is heading in this direction, so that's been going on. That bird out there has been making a racket, and also because I've not really been speaking from the heart about things. I've been couching what I want to say by what I think people want to hear rather than what I want to say, so I'm just going to go for it and see what happens. So yeah, the outsider has an appeal to me. I think the reason for that is that as a story I find it more interesting when you're dealing with somebody who has challenges or has had challenges in their lives, trying to find their place in the world, shall we say, to find acceptance either within the community or within a community that they create around them kind of thing. And I find that much more alluring than, say, a character who has everything going for them, shall we say. And also because, ultimately, I've always felt a bit of an outsider in life. It feels like that I have either always been kind of a step behind what is in vogue kind of thing for various reasons over the course of my life, or that because I do tend to know what I enjoy doing and so forth, and I enjoy doing lots of things, I'm never afraid to step away and focus my energies on different things and come back around to things. Like, for example, for many years I used to work as a wedding photographer and used to do photography a lot as well, and I still do photography, but less so than perhaps than what I have done in previous years. But it doesn't mean that I no longer enjoy photography. I love doing it and I will spend time doing it. And just because I don't talk about it as much at the moment doesn't mean that it's gone away. But it does mean that for some people who basically photography is the only sort of like pastime that they have in their lives, maybe they find it a bit strange that I switch between different things. The same can be said about my gaming and so forth. I probably never was going to be the kind of YouTuber that reviewed Super Mario World, you know, because nobody's done that before, or was going to, you know, only put out content relating to the Amiga computer, because I'm somebody who has a lot of different interests, and I'm going to follow my heart with things. I've always done that in life, and it shows no signs of changing. But there is something that has always been within me, and that has been my desire to communicate things visually through illustration, be that pixel art or whether it's through the manga illustration. So here's Saki, a fully worked up image. And I've always wanted to tell stories as well, but I've never really had the proper chance to do so. So to be able to tell the story about an interesting character that is an outsider in life, that feels like they're looking in from the outside, as it were, at what's going on in life, has a lot of appeal to me. It's something that I identify with myself. And yeah, so that's one of Saki's defining traits. She is an outsider. Now, the fact that she skateboards is not an incidental kind of thing which I thought, hey, that will look cool, you know, because people will get nostalgic about it kind of thing. They'll think back to their childhood in the 80s or 90s or maybe the 70s or whatever, when they may have had a skateboard as a kid kind of thing. or as a teenager, it wasn't just to sort of latch onto that as just sort of like a, hey, that'll tune into some people's sort of whatever kind of thing. It's a very integral part of Saki's personality, and there's lots of good reasons for that. But one major reason is that, unlike, say, for example, the UK, the US, Canada, France, Germany, many sort of Western countries, shall we say, Japan still very much frowns upon skateboarding. That may gradually change with the fact that Japan has only in the last couple of days won a couple of gold medals in the street stages at the debut skateboarding events in the Tokyo Olympics. But most public spaces in Japan, skateboarding is banned. It's socially seen as the activity of basically rebellious people and so forth, and that it attracts a lot of negative perceptions that, you know, basically all skateboarders are vandals, and all this kind of stuff. You know, stuff that you might have, you know, experienced back in the 90s, say, in the UK. And that's still very much the case here. So, I only cruise about on my board, going at a relatively sedate pace, nice soft cruising wheels, you know, so I make very little noise. I'm not pulling, you know, kick flips and shove-its and all this kind of stuff down the road. I'm just minding my own business. And luckily where I live in Iwate, I don't really get hassled, but I always make sure that I'm well out the way kind of thing. But there have been occasions where the police have appeared from nowhere kind of thing, and they're probably just patrolling in general. But it makes you wonder whether somebody has said, as a skateboarder, they're going to vandalise the roadside verge. You know, they're going to snap blades of grass because they're a skateboarder and they're a rebel without a cause. I'm too old for that shit. So yeah, that does feel uncomfortable at times, but yeah. So anyway, I don't want to digress too much, but the thing is that Saki is taking part in an activity that is seen as very much an outside activity, you know, like an antisocial activity. And now the town that she lives in, Kaito in Iwate, which is my sort of imaginary town that I've created for Saki, they kind of tolerate it. You're going to find out more about that in part 2 of Future Saviours. But basically, they tolerate it. But there are things happening that potentially could change that for Saki. I'm not going to spoil it, because part 2 is coming out soon, so which you'll be able to read for free. But the idea of the outsider is very much shown through that activity, and the idea of the outsider runs very deep within me, because, as I say, so let's talk about something recent. So I started my YouTube channel ostensibly focusing on things like pixel art, and naturally, because I tend to do a lot of my pixel art on the Amiga, it ended up with quite an Amiga heavy bias at times, and I built up quite a large subscription base around those two things. Fair enough. But one of the things that doesn't work very well on YouTube is, say for example, you have a YouTube channel where you give pixel art tutorials, you talk about Amiga specific stuff, you do a bit of retro gaming, and then you suddenly emigrate to Japan and start doing travel videos, you start talking about learning the Japanese language, and you start talking about hand-drawn artwork and drawing manga and so forth. Basically my channel, the audience generally is only there for set topics. They tend to watch different people for different things, and so what I've definitely found in the last year, as I've reorientated what I do, because I'm following my heart and doing what I feel is right for me, has meant that, you know, like, my audience has gone way down. But I'm okay with that, actually, because I know my mind. I know that I've always been somebody who is very passionate about a lot of things. Like, you know, I am passionate about things like pixel art, and I am passionate about, you know, playing my retro games and stuff, but it doesn't mean that I talk about it all the time. Likewise with my photography, you know, I was a wedding photographer for getting on for 10 years, and I've been a photographer for the longest time, and I love photography. I still do love photography. But just because I'm not talking about it all the time, or doing it as much as I used to, doesn't mean that it's left my life. You know, it's still very important to me, and I think sometimes because I tend to jump around through various things, because I have diverse sets of interests, it kind of feels like I'm always on the outside of a group. And that's not to say that I feel like various communities have left me or anything like that. This is not what I mean. What I mean is that in effect, I kind of make myself the outsider sometimes, because I do focus my attention on different things, and so I kind of know what it feels like to be kind of like, you know, I'm not really known for one thing or another kind of thing. I kind of just do my thing, and that really comes through in Saki, that she kind of just does her thing, you know, and I really wanted to get that across in this character because I know that really well, and I feel like that's kind of interesting. But as somebody who has... This is a tough one to talk about in a way, because, you know, what is success? And, you know, you could say, oh yeah, it's having a big YouTube channel, or it's making a load of money out of doing something, or... But in a sense, I feel like my life is becoming more of a success, because whilst I earn a fraction of the money that I used to, and various other things kind of thing, I feel like in terms of where I want to take my life, it's becoming more of a success, because at last I'm beginning to hone back in on my desire to tell stories visually and so forth, and that's why I love manga, because it's ultimately telling stories visually. And so I feel like I'm finding success on my own terms, and maybe in time I will find a community that, you know, embraces that, and I feel like I kind of already have to an extent, but it will be something that continues to develop over time. But what I wanted to communicate through Saki was this sense of the outsider, that she doesn't really fit in, she knows it, but she's okay with it kind of thing. You know, she has her ambitions. You know, she wants to, and has wanted to for the longest time, move to Tokyo, get into fashion design, and just skate. That's what she loves. And it's going to become a very major part of the story. And we've basically got that from the get-go in part 1. If you've not read it, go and read it. It's free. It'll be available in whichever corner it pops up in this video. And she has found herself trapped by her past. She is finding her past is holding her back in the present. That while she has had these ambitions for the longest of times, she has various factors that are holding her back on being able to do that. But in time through the manga, and I don't feel like I'm going to spoil the story by saying this, but she is going to find herself in following her heart kind of thing, and finding that she no longer has the past weighing her down kind of thing. And so that's a really important thing about the skating. I mean, like, I'm not really into sports manga or sports comics or sports in general, actually. I mean, yeah, I like to go out for a little cruise on my skateboard. I like running, but I'm not really a team sports person. So the fact that I'm going down the line of writing something that is maybe not a sports manga, but is going to focus heavily on an activity that some people may call a sport, seems kind of bizarre to me. But because I never thought I would be the kind of person who would be writing that kind of thing, but here we are kind of thing. But it's going to be through that activity that Saki is going to truly find herself and find her community and be embraced by people who are totally into, you know, what she does and all the rest of it. And she is going to really push things on and so forth. And I find that very interesting. Also, I'm just going to take a break for a moment. Okay, so I've just got some notes here on my laptop, and I think it's worth me just kind of reading this bit. So my turn towards, you know, sort of talking more about my experiences in Japan, the manga side of things, and occasionally dipping into retro gaming, pixel art and Amiga stuff, has meant that I've lost touch with many people in the community that I had, you know, sort of surrounded myself with prior to that shift. And it's understandable that these interests don't quite align with that community, and so it does sort of emphasise that feeling that I was always a bit of an outsider. But it doesn't really necessarily mean that I don't wish that it was different from that, at least not entirely. But what I've said here is that it doesn't mean that the die is cast now. it just so happens that I'm cutting my own groove in life, and maybe that will lead to something, and that is what I've planned for Saki, essentially. That's the way to put this. So hopefully that gives you some context for Saki's most defining trait, the fact that she is the outsider. And a little bit more about the skateboarding side of things. So when I was younger, obviously I've got my own history, shall we say, but you know, sort of when I was 11, 12, 13 years old, one of the things that used to happen would be that maybe on Saturday you'd go over your friend's house, we'd watch, you know, videos about sort of whatever it might be. Skateboarding was one of those things. We'd play video games, go out on our bikes, building dens, you know, all this kind of stuff that kids get up to, messing about occasionally on skateboards and stuff like that. It was never something that I was really madly into at the time. I enjoyed it, but I enjoyed watching the skateboarding and surfing videos and stuff. That was pretty cool. But I was never sort of majorly into it, kind of thing. But it kind of felt like, yeah, I want to sort of do something around that. Yeah, that stage of my life was something that I was quite fond of. And in the video, which I talked about sort of like what came first, the story or Saki, I talked about how this time last year I was very much looking back into my past as a place of retreat and sort of comfort and all this kind of stuff, and how I've broken away from that kind of thing. I suppose that's where maybe some of it came from, is that looking back period. But I think the fact, tying it to the fact that skateboarding in Japan is seen as very much an outsider activity, I felt like it would emphasise the fact that Saki is a very independent character. She knows her own mind, she knows what she wants and so forth, even if she feels held back doing it sometimes. And so, yeah, I just wanted to give her this real strong sense of otherness, but still that she really does know her own mind and stuff. So I just want to talk about something as well, which is a little bit more personal. And a few years ago, I was taking my mum to a hospital appointment, and we talked about this kind of stuff before quite a number of times, but this particular time my mum was talking about it quite lucidly, and it was even more clearer to me, the sense of regret in what she was saying. But when she was sort of, 16, 17 years old, she left school, well, probably at 16 actually, and so did my dad, as it happens. But maybe that's one of the motivations for Saki being a school leaver at 15. She didn't go to high school, but I've never really thought of it in that way. But certainly my mum had a lot of regret that she wasn't able to pursue a career in a more creative direction. She wanted to direct her career more towards sort of fashion or window dressing or some form of creative outlet, but her parents were very much the view of just get a little part-time job, get married, settle down, have children. That was all that they expected of her, kind of thing. And any deviation from that was not the done thing, kind of thing. And so I've brought some of that into Saki's story as well. You're going to see this a lot more in part 2, that there are these external pressures, because in Japan there is a more rigid perception of what a man's role in life is, or within the family, and what the woman's role is within the family unit and so forth. A bit more, shall I use the word, traditional. Values that may have been held in the UK back in the 1970s or even 1980s, for example, that have been gradually over time shifting. Now, I will make it very clear at this stage that Future Saviours is not written with some kind of political agenda. I'm not interested in pushing that. There will be certain things that will be broached in Future Saviours that I think to some people will find a little bit challenging, because they won't go down the tropes that they're usually represented within manga, shall we say, that there will be a bit more nuance to them, shall we say. In fact, actually deliberately so. But it's not really about pushing agenda. It's more about actually illustrating through various things in people's lives about how that really inhibits people's ability to really, ace it in life essentially. That there are various things that we have no control over that prevent us from really being the best that we can be in life, and you know, really making the most of life in a way. And so be very careful that I don't want to stray into making, you know, very agenda driven message, you know, sort of messages or whatever it's kind of thing is like the default kind of go-to kind of thing. But I thought that was quite an interesting thing that will emerge through this manga. I think it will, in some ways, Future Saviors will push boundaries on manga, but for me, I'm not too worried about that. I feel like that's actually quite a good thing. But anyway, but the thing that leads on from that is that I'm talking about things that are quite deep-rooted in people's traits and so forth, and I want to make it very clear that Future Saviors will have its moments where it's going to be quite introspective, where people are really thinking about themselves kind of thing, but Future Saviors isn't going to dwell upon the individual incessantly, you know. There is going to be a lot more about the actual doing that they do kind of thing. Yeah, so it's not going to be some, you know, intense psychological or whatever introspective kind of thing. It will have its moments, but it's not going to be that all the time. It's going to be quite action driven at times as well. So yeah, I've just got some notes here again that, you know, I don't want to make it unduly introspective. You know, they will do some soul searching, but it's more through their actions that things will happen and become clearer. So what I've written here is, I guess that is part of the message. I personally feel that there has to come a time where you know, you do stop dwelling on yourself, and you just have to get up and get on and try and do something. And for some people, that might sound a bit like I'm saying, pull yourself together and get on with it. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that, yeah, there is a time and a place for considering things and all the rest of it. But I do honestly feel like there comes a point where you know enough about yourself, and that if you want to break the mould in life and get out of the ruts that you might be in, you sometimes do have to take a leap of faith in life. That's what's worked for me. I'm not saying it works for everybody, but I feel like if you're brave in life, you can truly liberate yourself sometimes. I really honestly do feel like that. And I think it's also important that through doing that, you stop taking yourself so seriously. It's a trap that I've fallen into time and time and time again. And I felt like the times where I've been happiest in life is where I'm not taking myself too seriously. That things don't have to be perfect. That, you know, I can fuck up and it's okay, you know. I think that is so important. That, yeah, you know, you don't have to be so intense and so serious. That you can goof about, and it's through that you truly learn how to live sometimes. That, you know, that is when life is good. And it's only by doing that you're going to screw up and mess up and fall over and find yourself in the dirt and all the rest of it. But by God, it teaches that you're alive kind of thing. And that's kind of what I want in this manga, is this, you know, people realising that, you know, yeah, you know, I've got to get up and get out there kind of thing. And that's going to be so liberating for these people. So, yeah, it's easier said than done. You know, we all have various restraints in our lives, you know, family and other, you know, work issues, all this kind of stuff. You know, sometimes, you know, I've definitely been there myself where I felt very held back by myself and so forth, stuff going on. But it is easier said than done. But again, I'm giving a message in this manga. But yeah, so what I've written here is that in Saki, what we find is a character who ends up defining themselves by their actions, and a community that embraces him, and that I think is very exciting. And as I've got older, so somebody said to me quite recently, it sounds like you're writing your own Evangelion, and it's just like, that's not quite the case. And as the more I've got older, and you know, I love Evangelion. I'm not so much into the rebuilds, as you know, but yeah, Evangelion is like a psychological exploration that had mecha in it to get funding to make the animation. For me, Saki's skateboarding and fashion design is intrinsic to the story, because it's through both of these that she'll truly emerge free. And that is why Saki... So, okay, this is the bit which I'm going to wrap up with. And I want to read this bit. I'm sorry, but basically... And that is why Saki is the way that she is. I wanted a phoenix for this age. Too often online I see such a negative perception of the future being espoused. But I honestly, hand on heart, do not see it and feel it in myself or see that in the future. I believe there is every reason to have an optimistic vision for the future, and that there is no need to constantly retreat to the past for refuge. You know, time and time again on YouTube, you know, like part of my research for this video has been watching like people's video recordings made in the 80s, sometimes the 70s, and it's very easy to get trapped in a nostalgia moment, or the 90s even, kind of thing. You know, and so like I was watching this video not so long ago, and it was this ratty sort of VHS-C or whatever camcorder recording of Rodney Mullen, true pioneer of skateboarding. You know, most of the people watching my channel probably don't know who he is, but he pretty much invented every modern trick going in skateboarding. You know, the flat ground ollie and so forth, just revolutionised street skating and so forth. He is, to me, one of the real true pioneers in skateboarding, and he's also one of the guys that I could listen to for hours. He has such a beautiful soul. But this video was a clip of him when he was about 16 years old or so, and he is doing some of his routines and so forth in this car park, and the radio is playing in the car, and you've got all of the VHS kind of glitching going on, and there's all this great music from like Stevie Nicks, and what else was on it? I can't remember now, but there's certainly Stevie Nicks on there, and all of the comments below were just like, "Oh, from a better time. Oh, you know, it will never be like this again. You know, that was truly a golden age, never to be seen again. You know, the last great age to grow up in." I just think, talk about digging a hole. You know, you know, there is shit going on in the world, but there was shit going on in the world in the 80s. You know, with, you know, nothing, you know, nostalgia is such a strange thing. You know, it only takes some ratty VHS glitch, it only takes, you know, a certain kind of weather, it only takes a certain kind of fashion, it only takes a certain kind of music, and people look back on their past and they see themselves at the present, and they can only see that the past was some halcyon beauty that will never be attained in life again. And I just think that is just such a negative way to look at life, both for ourselves but also for the generation growing up now. You know, I'm not big on TikTok, and yeah, I barely know what it is. I mean, I barely know what a meme is, but you know, you know, I'm using a 10-year-old laptop. You know, I'm not really that into technology. But it doesn't mean that I don't appreciate what the youngsters are into, you know, their K-pop and their J-pop and, you know, whatever else the kids are down with these days. You know, those are all going to be the things that the youth of today are going to look back on fondly and all the rest of it. They're creating their own nostalgia without realising it. And all the things that we just think, what a load of old crap kind of thing, you know, 4K, you know, VHS was where it is at, or whatever, all that kind of crap. I just don't see it like that. I feel like, you know, we need to promote more positive values and all the rest of it. You know, we need to, you know, show our love of the things that we grew up with, the music, the fashion, the I don't know, the group, or, you know, whatever we was into. But I feel like you know, we also need to embrace the future. You know, we have to, you know, take those positive values and put that into the way that we want to see the future and all the rest of it. Not be so defeatist about it. I mean, this pandemic has been really hard work. It's taihen, a good Japanese word, you know. It's been, yeah, difficult. You know, and there are various things going on in the world that make us feel like, ugh. But come on, everybody, you know, we've got to pull together, you know, and we've got to fight for the future and so forth. You know, it's, you know, we probably at times only feel the way that we do now about the future, because we now understand the burdens of adulthood, and we understand more about, you know, things going on in the world and kind of things. But, you know, just because I grew up in the 80s and I look back on it fondly doesn't mean that the Afghan war of the 80s wasn't going on between the Soviet Union and Afghanistan, or the Taliban. It doesn't mean that spy ops wasn't happening in, you know, Central America and so forth during the Reagan years. It doesn't mean that the Falklands War didn't happen, or that, you know, in 1990, you know, people were protesting against poll tax, just because I'm thinking, oh, weren't those changing coloured t-shirts amazing and stuff, and wasn't, you know, Godfather such a great record and stuff like that. Doesn't mean that there wasn't problems in the world just because I look back on the culture of the time and think, you'll never get back to that, that was an awesome time. You know, and it doesn't mean that just because I don't understand things like TikTok and the pandemic has been terrible, which it has, and all this other stuff that's going on in the world, means that, you know, there is every reason to be so optimistic about the future, and we have to fight for it. Anyway, good, I'm now talking from the heart. So just to carry on. So yeah, I believe there is every reason to have an optimistic vision for the future, and that there is no need to retreat to the past for refuge. We just have to stop feeling threatened, victimised, trapped and incapable, and realise we all have agency. We all have potential, and we all matter to someone. Someone loves us, someone cries for us, someone smiles for us, someone thinks about us. We constantly have to fight those less than desirable guttural human instincts within ourselves to set ourselves free. And that is who Saki is. Yeah, that's basically it. Some of you may not agree with that. That's cool, you know. But that's what I feel. That's the message in Future Saviours. You know, I've had stuff in my past and all the rest of it, and I feel like one of the reasons why I've been able to get on and do things in life is because there came a day where I decided I can't sit here forever and a day reflecting on the past, or feeling like I can't do something because of X, Y and Z or Z. I've been teaching American English for too long. You just got to get out there and embrace life, and that's what Saki is my representation of that. She is the outsider who can see it in her own way and fights for it through sticking to what she believes in and is passionate about. Finds the acceptance by her community, her peers and herself. And that is Saki Endo, the outsider. For me, she is not me. There are fragments of myself in her, particularly the outsider aspect. But yeah, through all of the things that I've put into her, she's very close to my heart. For me, Saki rocks. Yeah, I think that's it really. I don't want to say any more than that. I don't think. Yeah. I guess that all remains for me to say is see you soon. Peace. I really hope that came across okay at the end. It's not easy saying what you really feel. I don't find it easy. Yeah.